back. I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to Bond Group in Waltham, Massachusetts, we are driving a pretty rare Porsche. This is a 1995 911 Carrera RS. They only made about 1,000 RS models. 270-ish of them were club sports. That has the big wing and the welded cage, typical of what you've probably seen on Instagram when you think of 993 RSs. But this one is especially special because it has factory installed rear seats, which were typically a deleted item on the RS, and there are only, I believe, 6 of these in existence from the factory. So these kinder seats are actually kind of a big deal. Power in the RS comes from a naturally aspirated 3.8 liter flat 6, making 296 horsepower, all to the rear wheels. The RS, of course, is a lighter weight version of the Carrera. It's a little more race inspired, it's a little lower. It has a standard limited slip differential. It has a 6-speed manual G50 gearbox with a shorter 1, 2, and 3 gear. So 4, 5, 6 are all standard, the same, but you should be able to rip through 1 through 3 pretty tight. We like that. And this one, because it doesn't have the aero package or the club sport package, it looks so much more subtle, other than the fact that you get this incredible front bumper with this lower splitter, and we've got the previous owner's French tags still on here. We've got the side skirts, obviously the wheels stand apart, and this gorgeous wing, which we only see on the Carrera RS. Gluing us to the road up front is a 225 section tire mounted to this 18-inch wheel. In the rear, a 265 section tire, and you'll notice these beautiful red brakes. They are from the Turbo. One of the best things about these old air coolers too is the doors. They open and close like bank vaults. It's fantastic. You do have power windows. We've got air conditioning, and we've got these beautiful lightweight RS door cards. However, there are speakers in the car because there is a radio. To open the door, you've got your door pulls here. This is your lock, which cleverly doesn't allow you to lock while the car is open. But let's take a look under the hood. So if we pop up this beautiful RS tail, we actually get to see some stuff, because in the modern Porsches, you basically see nothing under the little flap that is an excuse for a hood. Back in the day, though, our flat 6 buried way down low. We've got our AC compressor, our Vario cam labeled intake runners, and this is just so cool to look at with our little fan. And you can always just check to make sure, hey, we've got good tension on our belts. Very easy to just check some of the bare minimum things. Up front, we do have some storage space, which is super helpful despite having the rear space in the car, but there are no hood struts. So we do have this hood prop, which we need to be very careful with, because this looks like it just wants to destroy paint. And then you can pop that right down in here. I'm gonna hang on to that because of the wind, but there's your fuel tank. You've got your washer fluid, brake fluid, pretty accessible stuff. Under this mat is our spare tire, which is super helpful to have, because in the event of something going wrong, it really sucks to have to tow your car when you could just pop a wheel and tire on it. Under here, this is the most important part of any of these types of cars, because back in the day, this is where you would see all of the options listed. Now, despite the fact that this has air conditioning, power windows, rear seats, all those things, they did delete the front headlight washers, because I suppose that was something of a weight savings exercise. And you can see that this strut mount up here is carbon fiber. I don't know if that's original, but it is sure beautiful looking. And if it is original, that is pretty intense for 1995. So let's close it up, jump in, and take it for a ride. To get the RS started, we've got our typical 993 key, which is just my least favorite of the Porsche keys ever made, but we still have a left ignition. Jumps to life with our very familiar dashboard, similar to what you find on my 88 Carrera, which is an RS tribute of sorts. You've got fuel, oil level. Now that will come up a bit. This car was just serviced, and these are always the most finicky gauges that, you know, it only really works when it's fully warmed up, sitting on a level surface, blah, blah, blah. So use the dipstick, but, you know, that gives you an indication if something's like terribly wrong. You have your oil temperature, very important. No numbers on this, but you know, you get an idea of where it should be. Oil pressure, that's probably the most important thing we've got here. Big center tach. Our speedo, 300 kilometer per hour speedo. This car has 64,000 kilometers on it right now. Very jealous of whoever got to do that many miles in this car, because it's beautiful and fun and it sounds fantastic. Ugh. So let's get out there and take it for a drive. Power steering. There's a tiny bit of disconnect between me and the front wheels, but obviously it's still just a hydraulic assist, so I can still feel the granularity. It's just that it's a slightly lighter steering than you would expect with an RS on the tail. The power comes in beautifully, and the short gearing really allows you to make the most of that nearly 300 horsepower. Throttle response, crisp, instant. Off throttle, it takes maybe a half a beat before it drops the revs, but my goodness, this thing just gets out of the hole. It handles like a 911. The beauty of a 911 is that it's so easy to approach and find the limits because it's rear engine. I know, that's counterintuitive. People usually think these cars are terrifying because, oh boy, they're gonna snap oversteer on me and spin away. They can if you drive it incorrectly, but what you gotta do is, because that front end gets so light, you can basically approach the car until it starts to wash away at the front end, until you start to experience a little bit of understeer. And then you just use your throttle to either put the weight back on the front or start accelerating. Now, this is not as harsh a ride as the 964 RS. This is definitely an easier car to live with. It doesn't feel quite as absurd. The seating position is fine. I'm nice and low. I've got good side bolsters on this leather chair. The steering wheel is off a bit to the right. I don't know if you can notice that, but I definitely am like this. Not a huge deal. My 911's the same way. It's just the way these cars work. But it is slightly noticeable, and it's just something you adapt to, and it's part of the fun. The pedals, of course, are hinged on the floor, so they do this motion, pretty typical of the time, and always interesting to me that they did this for so long, that there were air-cooled 911s up until, what, 97, 98. That's crazy. Definitely feel the need to slow down for some ugly bumps. The suspension isn't incredibly soft, but it's soft enough that you feel like under compression. You don't want to bottom it out, but my goodness, the gearing is so perfect. I love the feel of this G50. I love that 1 through 3 is short and ready to party. It makes it so easy to drive. you just hit your rev matches so intuitively. And when you get into it a little bit on throttle, when you put some load on it, it just gets so grunty and angry. But what's nice is that unlike my Carrera, which is pretty hardcore, it's stiff, it's a little brutal, this is just lovely. I don't feel like I have all this pressure to go fast because it actually is comforting to drive at normal speeds. The clutch is awfully tactile. It catches kind of high, which is common on every 993 I've ever driven. But the beauty of an NA car, no turbos, is that it's super responsive. Like, I love a 993 turbo, don't get me wrong, but they don't really serve my kind of purpose. I like these more rev-happy engines, and the power is just super linear. Kind of an Autobahn burner. Now, it's not terribly loud in here. I have to say, for an RS, I thought this would be like really intrusive and invasive with road noise and no insulation, but it's comforting. I was just out in a 911R, a 991.1 the other day, and I gotta say, this might actually be a little quieter. Oh boy. Whenever I'm driving these classics, I am on heightened alert of bad driving. I do not want one of 1,000 and one of 6 Carrera RSs with these back seats from the factory to get injured by a clown in a Corolla. Brakes feel super positive. Nice initial bite, not afraid to get into them a little bit, but they are like a block of wood, so you do need to just kind of add pressure. But they're not so stiff and awkward that you feel like, oh shoot, I really gotta jam them. Like, they are there when you need them, which is wonderful. Sometimes these hardcore models get a little too hardcore, and it feels like, wow, if I am not like leg pressing this brake pedal, we are not going to be slowing down. I got a little bit of that sensation recently from the PCCBs on what was I driving? On the 911R. I was like, oh, I actually really need to dig into these ceramic brakes. Not the case on this. Those might be the most ill-fitting wheels ever put on a Mercedes-Benz. It's not particularly loud or raucous, it's just honest. It's thorough and dialed in. It is what it sets out to be, and it doesn't try to amplify synthetically what it should be to other people. It just drives well. It just feels good. If there was one thing I could point out that I feel like is like slightly disconcerting about it, it's just the steering weight. Like honestly, I think this deserves to have manual steering. if I were building this car, I would probably just do a manual steering rack in it and delete that altogether, because it wouldn't be that heavy considering you've got so much weight in the back, and it would give you a little more tactility with the front wheels. Now, the other thing that I'm a little surprised about is just the suspension tuning. Oh, beautiful new pavement. I can sink my teeth into this. Something that I value in the RS was that, yes, it was stiff, but it felt like it really knew what it was doing. It was super planted all the time. This is a little bit softer, which means that it gets a little light when it rebounds. It's like you want to take corners with thought, because when this gets light, you definitely feel it in the front and the rear of the car, and you don't want to get mixed up in some bad situation just because you entered a corner too hard. So while I appreciate the body roll and the slight level of comfort that it provides through sort of daily roads and daily driving, maybe being a little stiffer would help it around a corner, which is maybe what the sell was on the Club Sport. The Club Sport version of this RS was certainly a more track-focused car. So I guess what I'm saying is I need to drive a Club Sport to find out if that solves that problem. But the real shining star of this, other than this beautiful 3.8 liter flat six, is this transmission. It feels phenomenal. It's so precise and easy to shift. I know exactly where I'm gonna go. The rev matching is seamless, perfect, and the short first through third make this a joy. It is just wonderful to row through gears. You're never questioning where you need to be. You're never messing up a downshift. It is so intuitive, and to me, that's what Porsche does best. Sure, you could go out and take your Carrera S and try to mimic this car. You get pretty close, but when they do it from the factory, that's when you're like, man, some very good drivers, some very astute engineers were really on the pulse of this car and really made it special. So, thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Thank you to Bond Group for letting me drive a car that I genuinely had kind of forgotten about. The 993 RS is not like the heavy hitter thing that you're thinking about all the time. Right now, 964 RS is that car. So it's cool to have had this just kind of show up and say, whoa, I wasn't aware. And I can say, I really like it. I love it. I think I like the 964 a little better just because it's a little more hardcore, but I think most people would probably prefer this. I can't believe this is a yield sign. This is like the most sketchy thing. Really makes me want to go and shorten the gears on my 88 Carrera. Second and third are so long in that car, and it would feel amazing if it was like this. That would be a properly expensive endeavor, so I will likely never do it. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.